Hi, this is Mike Cummings. I'm going to go through a new methodology we've been working on here to distinguish ourselves in SCP, and we're going to call it digital transformation. We're going to leverage some examples and use cases from the group and talk about how we can work on a methodology that could distinguish us in the marketplace. The thing I wanted to make sure we cover is why we're doing this. One is I'm going to go through a framework that we used to use at Accenture, which is kind of easy to understand for prospects and clients, and it's proven to deliver kind of insights and results that they would actually value. We're going to go through an example with Straight Edge, where they use this method for client walkthroughs and landed a very big ticket sale with a orthopedic medical office in San Antonio. And we'll show how the methodology kind of was a pain point driven client walkthrough, where they identified real world examples of how technology was impacting negatively, in many cases, the business of the medical practice. And it positioned us from the very beginning as a business advisor, and we kind of used this in the sales process, but it easily transitioned into the client account management once we actually landed the client. It's going to be something that no other MSP would be able to use or be able to distinguish themselves on. And we'll see, for example, in this medical office practice, how industry-specific use cases can be shared across a group and actually used in marketing campaigns as kind of intellectual capital, intellectual property, to really show that we understand these businesses much better than any other MSP and can be able to usefully distinguish ourselves, and we can share those across SDP. We're still working at it. It's very, very beginning of this, but I think ultimately, too, we can start to map Microsoft toolkits against each of these kind of concepts we're talking about and be able to. The big idea here is just it's really at the thought process station and see if this is something that's worth pursuing. So I'm going to go through a methodology. This was something that actually was founded in the supply chain industry, but we kind of took it and used it across industry for basically walkthroughs of workflow. And it says what you're looking for as you do the process is looking, first of all, what can you simplify or eliminate? What you'll see in the example is a lot of manual inputs, a lot of redundancies. There'll be some complexity that's not being able to be managed. And just a lot of like workarounds, like they did it. This is the way we always did it. We just figured our way around it. And you'll see strongly in this case, the second step is integrate, which is how can you integrate both processes and actually applications together in a way that makes the workflow much more quick, fast, and effective. So you're looking for upstream value, downstream requirements, inputs, and in one case too, I think we could use this in integrated reporting in terms of dashboards. The next step is standardize, and what that says is we want to do the same process the same way across the business, right? And again, we want to emulate workarounds that they kind of use to make things, basically force things to work as opposed to make them work consistently each and every time. This can be, they have process and templates with it and controls, and we'll go through examples there, but I think this is something that we as MSPs can really bring to the table that others can't. And in the old days, automate used to be programming, right? Now it's different sets of tools, APIs and everything like that. But it really says is you want to do this first three steps before you rely totally on automation. Like if you automate a flawed process, you just get a faster flawed process. So that's the basic idea here, and we'll show how it works in a second here. So I'm going to go through a walkthrough. This is actually with Straight Edge. They recently, I believe it was in January, they finally landed this client. It was about a 3 or 4 month process. But what we're going to talk about here is they did a client walkthrough of business walkthrough of 2 offices for this kind of major orthopedic practice in San Antonio. And what they really want to do is just see basically practice management workflow, what applications they use at different steps in the process, kind of specific technology, workflow, and support challenges. And the person that did it, I believe Doug may have been involved with it, but it was certainly the lead business developer, Raul Vandez, a CAM, and then maybe one or 2 other ones. So they kind of went through the basic departments that was in each of these offices. So they talked to the physician assistants and the triage people. They had an X-ray facility in this. They may even have an MRI, I don't know, but it's for sure an X-ray. They talked to the actual doctors and what they found frustrating in the workflow. And then they talk to the administrative people, kind of scheduling, but all the way through to billing. So here's kind of, if you think about a medical office, here's the different kind of process. Think of this as a process map, right? So what this says is, in this example, a patient comes in, they got to get scheduled in first of all. Then there's an intake process. They get into the diagnostic room. After the diagnostic room, they begin some testing. And in the diagnostic room, right, they're taking notes and they're doing checklists and things like that. Then they may be sent for x-rays or testing. And they get discharged. And after the discharge, they got to go through the billing and invoice process. So what are we looking for as we go through this process map, right? We're looking like, how long does it take, right? The way an orthopedic medical practice makes money is it's how many patients they see as quickly as possible. So just what's the speed here? And then what's kind of slowing down the process in terms of bottlenecks, right? Like if you have to stop, give an example, like if you have to stop because one of the machines is not logging on, that's a bottleneck, right? If you can't access the notes from the previous diagnosis, that's a bottleneck, right? And because of the bottlenecks, what you find quite creatively is people, the nurses or the physician assistants and all the people in process, they figure out workarounds. So what you'll find is there's a lot of manual input in these processes. There's some data duplication, but they really just figured out if the process isn't working, how can we work around it? They can share passwords. We'll get to that in a second. Third is, if you walk through it, you're just looking for variability too. Is if, what is different each time you go through this process map? Is it always the same? Is there something that causes variability in the process? Is there something that makes people need to do something differently? And the ultimate thing, this is a pretty common concept, which is time to cash, right? Is, for example, if you get to the point at the end and you can't send out an invoice because some information is missing or some codes are missing or something's not proper, that's just delaying the amount of time it takes to get an invoice out, and consequently also ends up talking about how long it takes you to get paid, basically, right? So time to cash is kind of a common concept in productivity these days. So again, here's the basic process, right? And what we did was I went through and kind of summarized some of the detailed findings. We'll get into in a second. So simplify and eliminate means you look at what can be changed to make the process work more efficiently, right? In many cases, and this would turn out to be things you're going to eliminate. Integrate, again, is to say, how do things need to connect together so that the overall process, the master process, works better? And things not integrating are what lead to kind of workarounds and bottlenecks. Again, then we'll talk about standardizing. Like, what can we do to standardize things so that we do the same process the right way each and every time? And then automate those couple things that they just automated out of the process too, because it was basically related to one specific application, which was voice. Right? So again, what did they simplify and eliminate in this process? What you found in the process was there's a lot of login challenges. They had different equipment in the diagnostic room, for example, and when it was not being used, it kind of automatically logged out. Two is that you needed different passwords for each of those machines too. So what they were doing was either sharing passwords, or you had to come up with your own password each and every time. Again, an inefficiency. Because of these processes and actually the lack of integration, there's a lot of data duplication and manual entries. So we're always looking for, are we re-entering data that's already in the system somehow because it's just it's not figuring it out? Or are we just doing some manual processes to work around things so that we're able to get the data in, even if we have to kind of force it in? And what this all led to in the whole process was a lot of claims errors, kind of missing data, missing codes, delayed notes. So there was because of these inefficiencies in the technology, a lot of the crucial information was not getting done properly. And therefore, they had to either the claim wasn't perfect at the end in terms of what they had to do to invoice and get paid, or they had to refile it because the provider found some errors or some omissions in the filing. So again, there's a lot of things in there that says, okay, if this is happening over and over again, how do we eliminate it from the process? Or if it's overly complex, how can we simplify it? Right? So integrate. What they found was one of the reasons, like everything was working slow, was that their internet connectivity was poor, or at least substandard, and therefore it was either slow or kept getting disconnected, or their VPN got disconnected. Um, Two is there was very little data synchronization between systems. So that's as there's kind of a core business application of medical practices that feeds into these other testing, for example, or other kinds of systems that they have to put in place. But there's no data synchronization, or it certainly wasn't at the level it needed to be in order to make it efficient. And what they found is like notes were a big particular problem because there was really no automated way to create the notes or integrate them into the patient records or make sure that basically they're capturing what was going on real time with the client in the diagnosis. Right? Standardize. The big thing here was they were working with an MSP previously that had a very poor kind of ticket submission process, no expectations, no acknowledgement, no notifications, right? So the support system was really bad. So they wanted to standardize that from scratch once we started working with them. They also wasn't very transparent in terms of where things stood in terms of issue resolution and kind of the root causes of what's happening. Very simple things were kind of treated uniquely each time. So therefore, there was deleted, very routine IT issues, such as like printer configuration, et cetera. And a big deal was everybody was password sharing for multiple systems. So people were not using their own unique passwords. They were actually sharing passwords, and it wasn't the systems administration process wasn't set up correctly. So that's how Standardize works. And automate means basically if there is an opportunity for an end-to-end system to do things better. In this particular case, partially because of internet connectivity, the VoIP system was horrible. So they had really frequent drop calls. They had to get re-authenticated oftentimes in the system. And in fact, it got so bad that people were taking their cell phones out and making calls instead of using the VoIP system inside the facility. So again, what this shows is it's kind of a very intuitive process, right? It's really saying you're kind of walking through, and you don't have to be an expert in the business. You just have to be kind of a logical, analytical kind of business person. And by walking through these systems, and basically the people that are experts on how to make the system work better are the doctors and the physician and the technicians, the people that actually use it all the time. So just by listening and interviewing and kind of troubleshooting, you can actually start to think about how can we improve this process. So this is kind of a very, very simple methodology, one that we can use. It's one that we can actually start to build up use cases. This one in particular is going to be for a medical office, but it could be for accounts payable. It could be a function. It could be a different industry. It could be a law firm, right? We can start to use this methodology to figure out how to make digital improvements in our client's business. You see, and I'll send you this presentation. This goes into more detail and gives you kind of more detailed stories about the specific findings they had with this medical office. And there's 3 pages of that. So again, where do we take this, right? Again, we're at the very beginning of this, but I think it could be a methodology that if we embrace, we can minimally what we can do is do really good kind of case studies using this process to show how we can do workflow improvements for different kinds of clients. We can do use cases against this. Again, one thought I had was we could start to map, where are tools, Microsoft tools fit in this as well. But it's basically a starting structure that we can use in a framework that might be able to distinguish us and differentiate us in the marketplace. I think the story we went through, I know we went through it quick, but it's a really good example of how our depth of knowledge can be applied to a specific industry and show how we can do things that other MSPs can't do for that industry. So where can we apply it, right? As a minimum, what I'd recommend is we start to think to use this process, particularly for big clients, big sales opportunities, and just emulate what StraightEdge do. Basically do a client walkthrough kind of using that methodology. That leads pretty easily into we could produce basically an industry-specific use case and turn that into marketing materials for case studies or examples that allow us to kind of distinguish ourselves from other MSPs. And the last thing, again, I think very naturally we want to be the people that can use or leverage Microsoft in some innovative ways to make digital transformation a more of a reality. And so I'm going to try to just introduce this as a thought piece right now, and then we can talk through about where we can take it and if it's useful, and go from there. So thank you for spending the time to look at this, and I think we'll talk about it. I'm going to tell you in the background of the slides too, I go through some more definitions of this stuff. So thanks very much, and we will talk to you soon.